Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 838B, and today's date is December 9th, 2015, and the title of the episode is The Middle Eastern Countries Are Now Turning on the U.S. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, the U.S. government and their alphabet agencies, the FBI, NSA, CIA, and many others, have been spying on the American people for a very long time. And they don't even care if they violate the people's rights. They just don't care. And they use many different tactics and different ways to spy on the people. And the FBI has been using a device called Stingray. We discussed this in prior reports. And they pretended that it didn't exist. They said, no, we're not using it. No, police forces aren't using it. If the judge asked, to present the Stingray device, how does it work? They dropped the case against whoever they had something on. And finally, the FBI has admitted that, yes, they are using Stingray devices. And yes, they do spy on the people. And yes, they do hack computers, software, and they get information off of people's phones, PCs, and everything else. And this is coming from Amy Hess, who basically is the director of all of this. And Christopher Sogohian, the principal technologist at the American Civil Liberties Union, has said, this is high-tech and creepy. It's happening in the Operational Technology Division of the FBI, and the one who is basically overseeing this is Amy Hess. And he calls Amy Hess the queen of domestic surveillance. And she has admitted that, yes, they use the Stingray to mimic cell phone towers, to trick other cell phones into connecting to them. And equally troubling is the Bureau's use of the zero-day exploits, a malware that attacks code to exploit vulnerabilities, often unknown by the company or organization or the person. And it basically, what it does is it accesses the systems, and basically they can go in and poke around in the system. The FBI also admits that, yes, they're using facial and iris recognition without any type of limits or restrictions. And basically, they use this for all their surveillance. And yes, they are capturing ordinary, everyday citizens, and they're keeping all this information. Now, I said this before, and this is a solution. How do we basically show the government that we are supporting our rights, the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment? Well, we show them that we're going to block them. You cannot spy on us. We do this in many different ways. We use heavy encryption. Encryption not known to the government. Someone created an open source encryption key, which is on my site. If you scroll down, you'll see it on the right-hand side. It's called Pi. It's open source code. You can use Start Page, which hides your searches. It actually uses proxy servers to hide your location. You can spend money on encrypted email services. A lot of times during this year, they're running Christmas specials. And all you have to do is go into Start Page. Notice how I didn't say Google. Go into Start Page and type in encrypted email services. Find one. Make sure that this is not a government-backed type of service. And you can find out by going onto all different sites and looking at it. You can use products like Pocket, which is pocketpocket.com, for your credit cards that have those chips in them. Your license, which is going to be a real ID, which will eventually have the RFID chip in there. Your cell phone, your iPad, your laptop. You can slide this into the sleeve. It's interwoven with metal, like silver, copper. It blocks the signal. It stops people with scanners who are walking by you to steal the credit card information off of you. So there are different ways of protecting yourself. And I mentioned this before. There is a judge in the Northern District of Illinois that is putting a stop to all of this, and basically says, listen, there are 3 rules that they have to follow. Prosecutors cannot use devices in this area, especially when there's an inordinate number of innocent third parties, and they can't collect it. And if they do collect any of it, they need to adhere to the Fourth Amendment and immediately destroy the information within 48 hours. And then they have to show proof that they actually did destroy this information to the judge. Now, of course, this is a judge in a localized area, but we shouldn't need to do this. We should have the entire country and our government employees saying, yes, this is how it should be all the time, because you are violating the people's rights. Now, the government continually wants to spy on the people. And what they're doing is they're trying to pass certain laws, like CISA, for instance, which allows the government to take your information from corporations like AT&T, Verizon, Google, Apple, and it won't hold them liable. So basically what they're doing is they created the USA Freedom Act, which says the corporations will be collecting this information, which they do anyhow, and the NSA won't be collecting, but in reality they still are. They haven't really dismantled anything. And with CISA, it will allow the government, the alphabet agencies, to take this data, and the companies will not be held liable. They're off the hook. They also want certain companies to be free speech police. Right now, lawmakers, they have resurrected a piece of legislation that would require tech companies, social media companies, to report online terrorist activity. The Requiring Reporting of Online Terrorist Activity Act. Basically, like I said, all of these titles to these bills are always the opposite. Basically, what they want to do is create a police force to police the certain speech people are using on social media. That's what they're doing. But Senator Ron Wyden put a hold on this bill in the past, and he criticized the bill because everything is vaguely defined. And he says social media companies aren't qualified to judge which posts amount to terrorist activities, and they shouldn't be forced against their will to create basically a bureau of investigation to police their users and what they're saying on their accounts. Now, a lot of these companies do this already. We know Facebook does. We know YouTube does, because there are certain videos that basically are brought down, certain filters that are set up that block certain things. And we know the government, what they want is basically the control of information. And this is what they're doing, because they have the corporate media in their back pockets. The internet, the alternative media, new media, is a different story. And they're trying to gain control of this. Because right now, the central bankers have the creation of money. They have the control of the media, except for the internet and the alternative media. And the last thing they really need is the weapons from the people to leave them disarmed. And this way they can close down the society. They can control everything at this point. And this is their whole mission. And this is what they're trying to do. Now, the EU Parliament President is getting very, very nervous because they don't want countries to think on their own. They don't want them to decide if borders should be open or closed, because this doesn't fit into the one world government. And right now, we see the EU Parliament President insists the fall of the EU and return to nation-based thinking will become a disaster for Europe. No country alone can handle changes such as migration, climate change, terrorism, trade, and international crime. We must do it together. The retreat of many governments into nation-based thinking is fatal. Well, each nation can think on their own. Each nation can do what's best for their people, and they can also work with the EU. But if it doesn't benefit the country itself, there's a problem. But they don't want this to happen. They want full control of what is going on. Now, out in Ukraine, we see the death toll passes 9,000 people. There's about 20,000 people injured, and this is coming from a UN report which was put out today. And we understand after the coup d'etat, where the U.S. came in throughout the elected government and put in a puppet government, we saw that John Kerry, Joe Biden, quickly got family and friends into key positions in the gas companies in Ukraine. For instance, Hunter, who's a lawyer and investor, became the director of one of the Ukrainian gas firms. And right now they're being investigated by Ukrainian authorities and British authorities about what just exactly happened in this scenario. Now, it's very strange that there would be a basically overthrow of the elected government. And what is it, like a month later, we see that Biden and Kerry bring in a family member, a friend, and they're put on a board of directors for gas companies. I mean, this whole entire thing was completely planned. And the plan went south. Now, out in Yemen, we've seen different things occur. We know that Saudi Arabia, which is the proxy army for the United States government central bankers, are continually bombing Yemen. But Yemen is making incredible moves and pushing the Saudi troops back. And what they're finding, there were 7 mercenaries that were killed that were on the side of Saudi Arabia. And when we looked into this, we see that there are Latin American mercenaries that are leaving the ranks of the national armies of their countries to fight in the deserts of Yemen. And they're wearing the uniform of the United Arab Emirates. They have been contracted by private U.S. companies, and in some cases directly by the government of the Arab country. And they're coming from Colombia, Panama, Salvador, Chile, and they're receiving training in the United Arab Emirates before deployment in part from U.S. trainers. According to the analyst William Hartung, the United States government has trained a total of 30,000 soldiers from the 4 countries that make up the Latin American mercenary force in Yemen. And this is what the United States does. It hires mercenaries to fight the wars. Mercenaries are in Syria. Mercenaries are in Yemen. We see that Iraq has taken Ramadi. Large portions of Ramadi have pushed the Islamic State out. Now, the U.S. has been guarding Ramadi and keeping the Islamic State, their proxy army, safe there. And the United States right now is saying they're prepared to deploy advisors and attack helicopters to help with the Ramadi situation. And this is coming from U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter. But the situation doesn't need any help from the United States. The Iraqi forces are taking back Ramadi. What the U.S. wants is they want to bring in troops to keep it protected from the Iraqi forces. But Iraq is looking at this entire situation. They know they're supporting the Islamic State. They don't want the U.S. in their country. And Iraqi's Parliament Security and Defense Committee has now called for a review and cancellation of the agreement with Washington on security. They're saying that Iraq needs to overhaul the terms of the agreement on security or annul it completely. So basically, the Middle East countries right now are looking at the situation and saying, okay, the United States supports the Islamic State. They're supplying them with ammunition, weapons. Proof has come out that Turkey is involved in smuggling out oil out of Iraq and Syria and bringing it into Turkey. The U.S. helps them do this by not bombing the convoys. They use this money that they're getting, the currency, to pay for their covert operations. And in Turkey right now, there's a lot of journalists that are investigating this since this story broke. And there are Russian journalists that are inside Turkey. And basically they were stopped by Turkey, detained, and basically deported. They don't want them reporting on what is really going on inside Turkey. And this is what dictators do. The U.S. has approved sale of smart bomb kits to Turkey, worth about $70 million. And John Kerry is out there continually telling everyone that they're going to have a meeting on December 18th in New York to talk about Syria. And Russia's saying, listen, before we even start talking about what is going on, we need to make sure we know who are the terrorists, who's the Syrian opposition. So we need to put together lists and agree on who's who. And they're saying from the last meeting they had, this is what the U.S. agreed to. And now they're just saying, no, we don't have to do that right now. We want Assad removed, and we want to make a deal to stop the war. Well, this is the same argument they've been using since the beginning. Nothing's changed. And guess what? Russia's going to say no. Assad is not going to be removed. The people have to vote. But we know the U.S. will never allow this, because the last election back in June of 2014, 89% voted for Assad. And if Assad, with the help of Russia, remove the Islamic State from the country and liberate all these towns and cities, guess what? The U.S., it's not going to work. They're going to say Assad is our hero. And they know this. And they will stop it before it even gets that far. The Pentagon is urging Congress to release $116 million for the Syrian Train Equipment Program. Ashton Carter is saying, listen, he requested it, and Congress hasn't released it. We need the money now. We need for ammunition. We need it for weapons and other equipment. We need to get Assad. Give us the funds. And Congress is sitting there, and they haven't released it. Right now, reports are coming out that roughly 40% of U.S. sorties return to the base without striking the Islamic State targets, and they have all their weapons intact. Well, of course they're not. It's the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States. They're not going to hit the Islamic State. They're going to hit the Syrian army. They're going to hit the infrastructure. They're going to hit civilians. They're going to hit grain silos. The one thing they're not going to hit is the Islamic State. Russia right now is denying that they're creating a second base in Syria. They're saying, we don't need a second base. Our jets can reach any area inside Syria within 30 to 40 minutes. So what would be the purpose of another base? It serves no operational need. Russian aircraft has hit about 204 targets over the last 24 hours. And basically, they're hitting all the different areas: Aleppo, Idlib, Latakia, Hama, Homs. And basically, they're driving the Islamic State out. And they're pushing it back. The oil revenues from the Islamic State basically are going down the toilet because they're destroying the convoys of the trucks. They're destroying their routes. And basically, the revenue coming into the Islamic State is coming to a screeching halt. The Syrian rebels are now exiting Homs under the agreement with Damascus. They've been beaten there. The Islamic State has left. And right now, they're removing themselves from the city of Homs. The leader of the Islamic State, Baghdadi, a.k.a. Elliot Shimon, who's a Mossad-trained agent, has slipped out of Syria and has reappeared in Libya. Now, we heard reports that he was dead, that they bombed him, they got him, he's injured. He's perfectly fine because he's part of the entire proxy army. And of course, they're getting him out of Syria because Russia is really bombing them. Now, I just wanted to talk about San Bernardino, the shooting there. And there's a former NSA CIA contractor, Stephen D. Kelly. And he is saying that the mercenaries from Craft International, a tactical training company for the U.S. military, has carried out the false flag in San Bernardino. He said the shooting is just one in a long string of false flag events that I'm afraid to say are not over, and I completely agree with him. We'll probably be seeing several more before the end of this year. Now, the people who saw 3 tall white men wearing black shirts, khaki pants, and tan combat boots, they're actually the shooters. The other 2, the Farouks, they're the patsies. And this is the uniform that Craft International wears. And we've seen it in Boston bombing. We've seen it in many different false flag events. They're the ones who carried out the shooting. They left the area, and this is why they're wearing the masks. This is why they're wearing the fatigues. So no one can recognize who they really are. But what gives them away every single time is their khaki pants, their ski masks, and it is 3 tall white men. And this is just another false flag, and I agree with him. We will be seeing many, many more. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.